Oh, hey, Brendan. That was the first
Hey,
time I've seen that intro, so I was trying to figure out where we kick in, so I was ready to go.
whatever.
All right, guys, welcome to another live stream of the Atlanta Sea Colony live stream. I don't know how else to put that. Um, Today is a day that Brendan has not stopped talking about because he's been super excited. We have our friend Thane from Jules Undersea Lodge with us, and he's actually joining us from Jules. So he is actually submerged in the world's only truly underwater hotel right now, and he is going to be talking to us from there. So, Thane, thank you for joining us, and I'm excited to get to talk to you about all things underwater habitat related.
Happy to be here, guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
This is I didn't know right up until, and I mean, obviously, I knew that we were going to have you as a guest this week, but I guess if Brendan told me, I didn't pay attention, which isn't the first time it's ever happened, but I didn't realize that you were actually going to be in the underwater habitat talking to us. So that alone is going to bring up a bunch of questions, and I know Brendan's got a list of questions, and I know as we get some viewers in here as well, we're going to be able to have some questions. So Brendan, do you want to kick those off right away, or
Yeah, I mean, we can. I guess, open the floor a little bit. Just tell, for people who are not familiar with who Thane is, if you want to give a little bit about your background, where you came from, and how you came from where you are to being there at Jules.
Sure. Well, kind of a water baby. Grew up. My dad was, an early diving enthusiast. His NAUI instructor number was like 814. So that gives you some idea of how early I was exposed to it. Actually made my first dive at the age of 5 in the chilly waters of Morro Bay, California. A lady had dropped a lighter off the pier, and I recovered it. I think my dad pointed it out, and I grabbed it, brought it up, and got $1. So my first dive was my first commercial dive as well. But at the age of about 10 and a half, my dad was one of the first graduates of the Santa Barbara City College Marine Technology program, and was a saturation diver, did some North Sea oil well drilling kind of work, lockout and the bells kind of stuff. That was particularly dangerous. But when I was about 10 and a half, shortly after he got back in that experience, he got an offer to go to Puerto Rico and be the diving officer for the Puerto Rico International Undersea Laboratory and run the underwater habitat La Chalupa. So for 14 months, from the age of about 10 and a half to 11 and a half, I lived in Puerto Rico and was exposed to the world of commercial diving. Ultimately, there was about 8 to 10 kids that were, running around that site. And, the adults were busy, so they kind of let us go. And we, got to climb around on the submarines and get out on the, I got to ride in the wet subs and just, a lot of snorkeling, a lot of being involved in seeing what was going on. So that was a very impressionable time. Ultimately, after that experience, we ended up back in California. That's where I went to high school. And you did some diving off and on through high school. And then towards the end of high school, my dad suggested that I go to Patty International College. So as an 18-year-old, I went down to San Diego and became a Patty instructor. Luckily enough, just right place at right time. In a few years, I made my way back to San Diego, ended up working for Patty International College, which was a private business at the time. But Patty, knowing that they were going to be doing some serious revamping of the rescue diver, dive master, and instructor programs, actually purchased the college to use it as a, basically an incubator to test these programs before they put them out to the public. So as a young man, a 23-year-old diving instructor, I was got swooped up in the purchase and was moved up to Santa Ana, California, and taught for Patty, and was involved in helping to develop the rescue diver, dive master, and instructor development programs. And shortly after that, I moved over to Patty headquarters, became the first sales rep, kind of worked myself up through the ranks, and found myself from 1989 to 91 as the regional manager for the West Territory. So California, Oregon, Nevada, Washington, and Hawaii was my territory. Got to travel all over those. But, as a relatively young man with a wife and 3 kids, it wasn't the best job. My wife wasn't really thrilled with me traveling 2 weeks at a time. So left that position and decided to move back to Ohio so she could be around her family. and helped kind of rescue a 5-star instructor development center that had their course director pass away. And I took over what was known as C&J Aquatics at the time, and ultimately turned that into a 5-star instructor development center. And we added a couple stores to the process. So for a period of time, I was very active in Ohio, diving instruction. Most people don't know, but back then Ohio was the 8th largest certifier of divers in the United States. So very active. But ultimately always had the itch. I kind of did things backwards. A lot of times people will go into diving instruction, dive store business, and then they work their way to the PADI. I kind of did it backwards. I did the worked at PADI first, and I said, hey, I want to see if I can take all this knowledge that I've gained and run some dive stores. So Ohio, I'm not much of an Ohio guy. I grew up on the West Coast, so the Midwest was a bit of culture shock to me, and I'd always been. As a family, we owned some property on the Big Island. I'd always been interested in making my way back to the Big Island. So in 1996, I moved to the Big Island of Hawaii, opened Planet Ocean Water Sports in Hilo, and had a very successful operation there for a long time until the mayor didn't like where I was taking my diving students. It was near his vacation home, and he ended up turning that into a marine reserve and banning snorkeling tours, and that was kind of the end of that. And to be quite honest with you, as a man who had a family and had kids in high school, wasn't really anywhere I could go on the Big Island, at least on the east side, to continue the diving career. So I kind of had to put it behind me and look for something else. I ended up becoming a sports journalist. So the past 10 years, I've been as a sports journalist on the Big Island, and really the kind of the football expert, if you will, and statewide would be involved in television shows and so forth, promoting football. And that was very happy with that, and was actually had some growth opportunities, and just had become the sports reporter for both of the major newspapers on the Big Island. I was going to cover surfing and rugby and rodeo, some of the non-high school sports that we were very proficient at, and was thrilled to death with that. But then March 13th came around and the pandemic hit, and my job disappeared. Basically, I was a new sports writer, and long-time veteran sports writers were losing their jobs. So there was really nothing for me to do on the Big Island, and just started looking back at my history a little bit. And to be quite honest with you, I really didn't even think about the habitat or Jules at first. I just was so affected by my time in Puerto Rico that I started doing some research and just got onto Google Maps and wanted to see if I could track down where I lived in Puerto Rico and where the habitat used to be stationed. And in that process, I'm a fairly savvy social media guy, so I started bumping into these Puerto Ricans who were doing some drone footage of the sites, started to run into the Puerto Rican people who had worked there, and some of the people who I had known, and they were like, "Oh man, that's so cool that you're starting to look into this." And I said, "Well, that's interesting." And that was a cool project, and I don't really think it's got its due. It was came on the heels of Jacques Cousteau, and Jacques Cousteau was so famous, and what he did was so well covered. But, Puerto Rico kind of isolated, non-English speaking. It just didn't really, the eyes weren't on that project as much as they should have been. So I thought, well, maybe it's time. And it kind of figured out that, oh, wait a second, the 50th anniversary is coming up. And, maybe that's something people might be interested in. So I just created a Facebook page, tribute page, Prinal 50, and put it out there. And, I didn't even really think about it. But when I got out of the diving business in 2003, Facebook, YouTube, none of this stuff existed. So people really didn't know. Kind of Thane just disappeared from the scene, but they didn't really know why or where I'd gone. But, I came back on Facebook and started reconnecting with a lot of my colleagues from the diving business. And, there was a lot of interest. A well-known publisher said, "Hey, I think you got a story here, and I'd like to help you write a book," and so on and so forth. So Primal 50 was born. And throughout the process, I just ended up reconnecting with Jan Koblik, who's the founder and whose kids I grew up during that time. And over a course of 4 or 5 meetings, it's like they weren't sure after, ultimately the habitat had been closed for over a year, and they weren't sure what state it was going to be in or if they were even going to attempt to reopen it. And through a number of conversations that I had with Jan, I just basically at one point said, "Jan, what is it going to take to keep it open so we can celebrate the 50th anniversary, which is going to be October 4th, 2022 is the 50th anniversary of the launch date. And then November 18th, 2022 is the 50th anniversary of the first mission." And he said, "Hey, I need you to make a commitment, get down here, learn how this thing works, and take a chance and run it for me so we can keep it open. And I didn't have a whole lot better going on. That was a great opportunity, and so I jumped at that, and no looking back since then. I'm happy I did it, and ultimately. There's a lot of things about the pandemic that cut me off at the knees, but this opportunity came out of it. So that's it's a really good opportunity for me, and I'm happy to be able to do the work to keep it open and continue to promote the legacy of the habitat, and look to the future and what it can do in terms of promoting manned marine exploration, conservation, and just preserving what we had. And one of the things that really got me was I started doing some of the research. Excuse me. Was that the article on by Forbes 3 or 4 years ago when they said by the year 2050 nobody's going to want to dive. The ocean's going to be so warm and most of the marine life is going to be gone that scuba is going to cease to exist. I thought, well, is there anything on my little part of the world that I can do to maybe start to reverse that? So that's kind of why I'm here.
Very cool. Yeah, that's how I actually found you. Is I always keep up with Jules and so on because it's always been one of my bucket lists to go down there. And I knew they were closed almost all year last year because of the pandemic. So when I hit them up at the beginning of the year to find out that or end of last year that you're going to be closed all of 2021, and I didn't even know that the state that it might not open at all. I was pretty upset about the whole thing because did I miss my chance and stuff along those lines. And I was like, I don't want to wait till 2022 to get down there. So I'm glad to hear it's opened back up because I now definitely need to get down there this year. Make that happen. But I found you because once again, following Jules, the Primal 50 Facebook page, it showed up as something I might be interested in. I think is how I found you, and through that, so that I was obviously follow that. And there's the primal50.com as well. So, but you got videos and everything else on there as well.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting resource if you're interested in the history. I've added a couple things on over the course, and unfortunately, I've had to kind of put that on the back burner for a little bit while I've gotten Jules back up to speed. But I've got at this point, I've got all the newsletters on the website from the time it was in Puerto Rico, which is fairly informative, and I've got the manned undersea and technology reports. Those are both part of the website. So if you're interested in the history of manned undersea exploration and the history of the La Chalupa, you can really dig deep by going to primal50.com.
Yeah, and we'll turn this into a podcast. So I'll make sure I put all the links and stuff like that into the show notes and stuff for people that maybe listen to it later on as well. So we get that out there for you too. One thing you didn't mention was your dad and his involvement. So what all involvement did he have, and how? Obviously, that was very foundational to where you are today. But what can you talk about his?
Sure. Well, ultimately, like I said, we were exposed to diving. I mean, my dad started diving back when he was 16. They ordered aqualung equipment through the mail, and my grandpa read a few books, and basically they learned enough to stay alive. And my dad was hooked from that point forward. And so, ultimately he went into the Navy, ended up being assigned to do some work over in Puerto Rico, and as electronics technician, helping with some of the surveying they were doing over there. And so, it made an impression on him. And when, I was always exposed. I mean, I remember when he was at Santa Barbara City College, they would take me there, and I made my first chamber dive, probably when I was like 8 or 9, going down to 50 feet in a chamber and so on and so forth. But when we really, when we moved to Puerto Rico, that's when I became more aware, of how, how much he had accomplished within the diving industry to be put in charge of the diving operations for that type of operation. That's a pretty significant accomplishment. And, some people know, others don't, that, we very safe program. There were very few accidents at all, but my dad happened to be involved in a surface accident where they were moving the habitat back into the harbor after the third mission, and got involved in some high tension line, and actually had he was slacking off a line under high tension on a bollard, and the bitter end of the line got caught in some of the decking pipes, and they had a lot of high pressure piping and tanks and so forth on the deck, and he didn't want to let the line go for fear that it would take out some of the high pressure lines and tanks and so forth that they had. So he held it to the last minute. When he finally let go, it caught his wrist, and it threw him about 20 feet in the air and about 40, 50 feet off the habitat. One of the aquanauts recalls thinking, man, that guy Frank, he can jump awful high, because he just caught it at the corner of his eye. And ultimately, he broke his wrist. I mean, it broke his wrist, basically almost detached his wrist. But
wow.
It was Puerto Rico. It was 1972, and unfortunately, the medical care let him down a little bit. He developed gas gangrene and lost his arm. But I will say this. 2 missions later, with one arm and probably about 20 pounds down, he was right back at it. And he was actually an aquanaut on the 8th mission. We ultimately had to leave Puerto Rico because of the damage that he had sustained. We had to go to Miami, and so he could get some additional work done at the VA. And that was kind of the end of our time in Puerto Rico. Had that not happened, I suspect we would have rode the Prinal, to the end, to all 12 missions, and I would have had more time in Puerto Rico. So that. That certainly, in terms of my dad's involvement, that was a big part of why I ended up doing what I did. Now, I will say this. I considered commercial diving for about that long, and I said, well, my dad's got, he had stories from back in the bell diving days about what happened, on some of the North Sea lockout dives he did working on the oil rigs, and that combined with what happened during that time pushed me in the recreational diving, direction. And I'm honest with people. I'm a true recreational diver. I like the bright, sunny, warm water. I like to take pictures. So I'm not going to be your rec tech guy. I'm not going to be cave diving. If I had to rely that much on my equipment, it would scare me. My equipment tends to be held together by sand and salt, and that's the way I like it.
Yeah, when I graduated high school, I looked at getting into commercial diving as well. I started reading some of the horror stories. I'm like, yeah, that's not my life. As interesting as that may be, I don't want to lose any limbs or whatever. So
probably the closest I got was I was accepted to Florida Institute of Technology for the I want to say aquaponics, but basically aquaculture program back in the day. I never made it, but that was kind of where my interest lied, not necessarily going down to 500 feet and cranking on a oil wellhead or something.
Right. One thing we keep on talking about Prinal, and I'm assuming everybody knows, but La Chalupa and Jules are the same habitat.
Yes. Ultimately when the Prinal program ended, and really, not a lot of people, kind of aware of what happened or why, manned exploration slowed down at that point in time. Probably one of the most important accomplishments of Prinal and La Chalupa was the development of some new saturation tables where they identified what were the limits of working divers. Once you got saturated, how far up could you go? How far down could you go? And, so that was the major accomplishment of the Prinal La Chalupa era, was developing these new tables. And once the military and the oil companies and stuff got that information, combined with the political climate and the state of the nation in the early 70s, the money just dried up. And so, La Chalupa was shipped over to Miami and was sitting in a boatyard. In fact, I can't remember the name of the movie off the top of my head, but I remember going to the movie theater back in the day and watching this movie, and all of a sudden I'm seeing it was based in Miami. It was I've got it on the Prinal50.com website. You'll have to look that up. But Dom DeLuise, and it was the Smokey and the Bandit kind of take, and I saw people running across La Chalupa. It was in the Miami Harbor there, and I was like, oh, hey, that's La Chalupa. And I looked it up recently and got back. So, so in the early 80s, Jan Koblik had another go, circled back on La Chalupa, and, was able to get the financing together. And so I believe 1986 is when, it was placed out here in Key Largo and became Jules Undersea Lodge.
So with that, I guess that leads to my next question here is to you, I guess maybe this is a personal question, but why is Jules so important?
Well, I mean, I think it illustrates a couple of things. Number one, this is an underwater habitat that's been continuously underwater for 30 some years now. And I'm of the opinion that we're kind of pie in the sky talking about colonizing Mars, when in reality, I suspect that there'll be people living at one atmosphere well before we ever have a colony on Mars. I mean, if you look at climate change and rising sea levels, if I lived in Kiribati or the Maldives or something like that, where they're losing land rapidly, maybe I want to build a house that's able to, deal with that. And, 20, 30 years down the road, if the water levels get to the point where it's over my head, I have a house that I can still live in. I essentially didn't lose my property. So I think, promoting one atmosphere living and the reality that something, and this was 1972 technology, you can buy stuff at Home Depot now that, wasn't available back then and was used to keep this thing down. So I think the fact that it was built in 1972 and continues to operate today with, minor, adjustments to the operating procedures, is a testament to what could be done if we really put our mind to it. And obviously that's, where you guys are
right.
thinking. And so, I fully support that. One atmosphere living is something that, people are going to be doing, and probably sooner than later, for sure.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered right there and talked about the single atmosphere living. You already addressed that. One thing I guess I do want to hop onto is the whole, it kind of off subject a little bit, but the whole Aquanaut program that Jules offers is very unique as well. I think it's the only place in the world you can do that as well. Once again, it's something that you guys can tote. And so if you can explain a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, we have a couple, we had 3 different options basically in terms of how you can visit Jules. We have a lunch presentation, lunch program where you get to spend about, 4 hours down here and, link it together with a dive in the lagoon, which is interesting of itself because, there's some aspects of the lagoon. I mean, it is a lagoon. It's not the gin clear water of the Caribbean for sure. But, we have a mangrove environment. We have some unique animals here that we're able to see and really, start to understand some of the environments that people don't tend to look at, so nobody says, hey, I want to go dive the mangroves, but here you're allowed to do that and also, get down and see the cannons and maybe a manatee is going to show up and you're going to run into some seahorses and that kind of thing. So, kind of is a way to introduce people to some different environments they wouldn't normally take a look at. And I think, just our mangrove dive is very, very interesting. If you take the time to slow down and get in amongst the mangrove roots and see the sponges and the anemones and the life that is supported by mangroves, that's very interesting. The other thing is just an overnight, where it's less than 24 hours. You check in at about 1:30 and you're out by 9, the typical Airbnb. You get to sleep a little bit, but when we go, we want to see you go. But, so that's a unique experience for people that just want to stay down here, but don't have the diver training bug and aren't really trying to collect certifications. But, for those that are interested in it but want something unique, this, to my knowledge, is the only place that you can spend 24 hours underwater, it's not a lot of people think about this, but you are saturated. You are a saturation diver at that point. It's just, you're not prevented, the gas rules don't prevent you from going directly to the surface, so I mean, it's a very safe experience, a very safe way to get that type of experience and, add that to your list of credentials. So yeah, ultimately the Aquanaut program is a PADI specialty. And, we have a lot of objectives that we, try to meet, try to introduce you to the things that you have to take into account when you're living in one atmosphere. Like a lot of people probably don't think about what it takes to get stuff down here, okay, how, when it was first created, all the work was done while it was at the surface. Okay, and then he sunk it down. Well, at some point in time, the refrigerator dies. How do you get a new refrigerator down to 22 feet? That's a huge airspace, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you keep it from collapsing? Just to illustrate what I did, one of the first jobs I undertook was the what we call the moon pool, the hotel water interface. And over the years, that's where everybody comes in there and out. You got tanks and weights and so on and so forth. And when they first put it together, real nice tile job and so on and so forth. Well, over the years that gets beat up, and then you've got it's metal, it's salt water, rust happens. So that was probably the most pressing issue, because once we made the decision to see what it would take to get the lab open, we found that the majority of the systems were fine. The critical systems were fine. All the electrical was fine. The air delivery system was fine. Air conditioners, everything was working. The water, the hot shower and the toilet and so forth. That wasn't the issue. It just ended up being that, hey, it's an old girl and she needs a little tender, loving care. So I swam 36 bags of concrete down here and poured a new moon pool floor. Basically put a 2-inch cap on the floor, and that's going to keep this. The moon pool is going to be in great shape for years to come. But it's like, okay, geez, I gotta do that. How? And the sad thing is, the first 30 were hard work. I finally figured out the best method. About the last 6 were a little easier. But that's anything we got to bring down. So when people come to the hotel, your clothes, your cell phone, your toiletries, etc. We have to put that in a dry bag inside a, like a Pelican case, an Underwater Connects dry case, and attach a 50-pound lead pig to that thing and bring it down. And even with that, it collapses a little bit. And then we got to let it sit there for a few minutes and equalize before we can open it up. That's how we deliver pizzas down here, which is the big thing, getting the fresh pizza down here. So I think that's the thing that I think people probably haven't put a lot of thought into is, what it takes to maintain this hotel and keep it in the condition that it's in over the years, based on what it takes to get stuff down here. Yeah,
that's a valid point. I know we're going to shoot over to some questions here in a second, but a couple more things here. So obviously this isn't for everybody. Jules isn't for everybody. The whole scuba barrier and stuff along those lines. But if they're interested in this and they want to support what you guys are doing down there, what some avenues they can do that?
Well, ultimately, Prinol 50. That if they want to support that and kind of help us out, that you've got I'm wearing a vintage Prinol T-shirt. I've got the vintage mug, so they could go to deeplydesigns.com and help us that way. But ultimately, I think that it's important to understand that even if you think it's not for you, maybe you haven't thought it through. This is it's a 20-foot dive to get down here. It's well within the realm of Discover Scuba. So even if you say, hey, I don't dive, can I still do it? Sure you can. We can give you the Discover Scuba, and we can help you get down here. We also have, and that's one of the systems we're working to get back to sea. We also have hookah rigs. So we have 2 hookah rigs, so we don't necessarily have to strap a huge tank on your back. We can use limited weights and our hookah rigs, and we can swim you down to the lodge that way as well. So, and ultimately we're part of Marine Lab, which is a nonprofit organization. So Marine Lab maintains the lagoon, is the owner of the habitat. And, so if you are interested in supporting the conservation efforts and the educational efforts, then you could certainly go to marinelab.org and support us through that, because they do a great job of, ultimately it's about the youth at this point, and the more we can do in terms of training the younger generations about the need for conserving the ocean and doing it right now. Like, we can't wait. We need to jump on it and get on it right away. That's what Marine Lab is doing a really good job with, is bringing in the young school groups and really introducing them to a variety of marine environments and talking about conservation and really inspiring people to want to become marine scientists and conserve the ocean.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned there was the hookah system, and I thought that had been discontinued or hadn't been used for a while, and so I was curious if that was still going to be a viable solution or not moving forward.
Yeah, it's just just one of the general maintenance things. We need to do a couple of minor adjustments, and it wasn't high on the list because we have an alternative to that. But as I start to check off more and more of the boxes, I actually did look into what it's going to take, and it's not much. Ultimately in terms of what it's going to take, to get I'm waiting on a part or two, and as soon as I get the parts in and install them, then the hookah system will be right back up to speed.
Nice.
Do you guys still scuba certify people there?
Ultimately we have the ability, but we work with so many dive stores who are doing that. We don't need to necessarily compete with them, so it's not something we promote. We do have instructors here, and should somebody call up and say, hey, I'd like to do it, and we can certainly do referrals and we can do open water courses. But what we really like is to see all of these dive stores that come down and use, because again, the lagoon is a unique dive training site. It is very well designed for dive training. It's deep enough that if you needed to, and last weekend, oddly enough, we had such high winds here in Key Largo that the dive boats were shut down for about 4 or 5 days. So we had a really busy period here where, some people were probably forced to make their 4 open water dives here. And luckily we have the depth to make that happen. But we love to see the dive stores come down here and use this as a training site. You'll see a lot of things like rescue diver training, very well set up for rescue diver training. So we see a lot of that going on. And it's just, it really is beneficial to the dive stores in South Florida to kind of have this backup that, hey, if the weather really goes south, we can always get to Jules and still, meet the needs of our customers.
Did that answer your question there, Adam?
Yeah, because one thing that Brennan and I always talk about is so I live up here in South Dakota, so I don't really have very many places that I could, if I wanted to go get scuba certified, which the more I get involved in this project, the more I kind of want to. Sure. But the closest place for me is 8 hours away. Yeah. But I'd love to be able to go down there and, stay the night at Jules, but, as far as being trained and all that, I have zero experience.
Yeah, again, I can only speak for Patty, and having not been active in the industry for quite some time, I'm not sure what SSI and now, but I'm sure they're doing similar things. But, you can do the e-learning program through Patty. You can get all the book work out of the way, all the testing and so forth. And then, there's a dozen dive stores within an hour's drive of Jules that could, take care of that, the dive training for you and have you ready to go. And like I said, we certainly do the, if somebody needs to have basic training to get down to Jules, the Discover Scuba program is perfect for that. And that, just takes a few hours and we can have you down in the habitat, no problem.
Sounds good to me. That's what I'm going to do.
You want to, was there anything else that you wanted to address as far as Jules, maybe misconceptions or news and stuff like that?
Well,
maybe...
I think one thing that, a couple things. Number one, we operate on low pressure air. So the air that's being delivered here comes in at between 80 and 100 PSI at about 20 cubic feet per minute. So this is not like a scuba tank, right? There's not 3,000 PSI. There's not significant pressure. So this is an extremely safe experience. Ultimately, safety is our number one priority. So we make sure that we've got our ducks in a row. But we have compressors. We have backups to the backup to the backup. So we have 3 compressors. We have we have a generator should the power go out. But this is an upside down cup. And really, there's not a lot of places the air can go. So even if we had our systems broke, everything went wrong, it's still a safe experience. We've got emergency lighting. We have a crew here to deal with that. So we, in terms of a safe experience, this is a super safe experience. The chances that some kind of catastrophic failure would occur that would cause, problems with the habitat, it's hard for me to really come up with a scenario that really would put people in danger in terms of the habitat. Now, what we would be most concerned with, what we prepare for, is somebody that's down here that has a medical issue that we have to deal with. So that's more of a concern. But the habitat is super safe. And the things that could go wrong just are really not going to be such that it's really going to endanger you significantly. And we have plenty of contingency plans to deal with anything that goes on. So super safe experience, not really something you need to worry about. Basically your health coming down here is more important as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, in some instances, it's probably safer being down there than it is on the surface, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
now, the other thing, here's the one thing, a lot of people, and I've had it happen to me, I had to think this through, but you can't come down here like, you could come down here and like, oh, I'm going to jump out on mast fins and snorkel. Okay, right? Jump out on mast fins and snorkel, swim to the surface without thinking about, oh, I've got 22-foot, level air in my lungs. You got to think that through. So we ask that you not do it. We don't want you to free dive in and out of Jules, because it is safe if you know what you're doing, if you're thinking it through. And where that came through to me is my first time down here. I was excited because I had housing for a new iPhone, and I brought it down. Took pictures on the way down. When I got down here, I took it out. And as I was getting ready to go, I was like, oh, wait a second. I can't put my iPhone back in the housing and seal it up, because as I ascend, poop, it's going to pop open, and that's going to be a problem. So, that's just something you have to be aware of the physics of diving and realize that although it seems like, hey, we're just breathing normal air and it's all good to go, you are at, depending on the tide, 22, 25 feet in the moon pool there. And so that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, I always wondered if you could free dive down to it. And I saw you made a post about it not too long ago, how you had been free diving down to it. But once again, what you're doing. Yeah, I didn't
think about that, and ultimately after further review, we took that down because, again, it's something you don't want to take lightly, because you make one mistake on that and, you're paying for that.
Yeah, as I said, you know what you're doing. You're trained. You know exactly what you're doing. But yeah, that was one of the biggest fears when I got certified, was them talking about all that can go wrong during ascent if you especially emergency ascent, if you don't breathe out. And it's like that was enough fear in me right there. So, you want to shoot some questions over at him?
Yeah, let's. I'll post the ones we've been getting. I just told everybody in the chat that we weren't ignoring them, but we wanted to get through the questions that you had written down first before we started asking them. So our first one was from Marty. He asked, how is the transition different, or how is the transition to different atmosphere? They're at Hurls Vern, if that, what? Do you know what he's saying, Brendan?
Yeah, I basically that. I don't, you don't really, I don't think you notice any difference. Once you get inside the habitat here, the air seems the same. It's air conditioned. I don't think you really think about it. That's the whole point when we just talked about freediving and stuff, is you don't think about it. It seems normal. You got to kind of remind yourself, hey, I'm still at 22 feet, so I can't just jump out and pop to the surface. I got to think that through, but yeah, I don't, and realistically, even if you're down here and you're saturated through the Aquanaut program, it's not like you come up and you don't need a safety stop. You can make a direct descent to the surface. You're well within the dive tables as far as that's concerned. So it really isn't much of there's not much of an effect at all in terms of being down down in Jules versus being topside. A little more humid.
The other one, well, you kind of already answered this, but is Jules at full operational status right now?
Yes, we have hosted 3 or 4 lunch programs, and we just had our first Aquanaut program. Congratulations to Ivan Francis of Indiana, who was the first Aquanaut certified in 2021. Took advantage of that. He wanted to be first, and so he did. But we have missions, I think 3 or 4 missions scheduled for next month. So we are taking bookings. You can go to jul.com. You can contact our operation or our overall manager, Teresa, in the office there, and she'll be happy to take your reservations.
And not so much a question, but our friend Glenn, supporter of our endeavor, he did say that he lives in Victoria, Texas, and the habitat was built less than 3 miles from his house.
Well, I hate to tell you this, Glenn, but you are not correct. So you have some bad information there. That may be Marine Lab, but Jules was built in Riviera Beach, Florida by Perry Submarine. And I can guarantee you that. My dad was over there doing it, and I have the pictures to support that. So Jules was built in Riviera Beach, Florida by Perry Submarine.
Learn something new.
What was the next one? Oh, okay, from Glenn again. Is this the third location for the habitat? How many times has it been moved?
Well, if you count being dry docked in Miami Harbor, then yeah, but it hasn't. Well, actually, let me take that back. This Jules or La Chalupa is considered by many to this day to be the most sophisticated underwater habitat ever built for one reason. It moves every single time it does a mission. It was never, when it was actually doing scientific missions, it was not tied to the ocean floor. Every month it was taken out, they dropped it down, and in a different location many times. So it, I think it did 8 or 9 missions off the coast of Southwest Puerto Rico, but it also moved many, many miles away and did a couple other missions in different parts of the islands. So it has moved around Puerto Rico, probably 5 to 8 different sites in Puerto Rico that it was brought to. But then once it was brought to Key Largo, Florida, and dropped here, it hasn't moved since 1986.
Okay. What are the costs of staying at Jules?
Well, it depends on the number of people, but ultimately, you're going to be paying at least $1,000 for a single occupancy, a little bit more if you want to get the Aquanaut program, and then as you add people, and you can bring 6 down, but you'd have to be very friendly 6. It'd be, so really comfortably 4. And prices are according. I don't have them off the top of my head, but if you go to jul.com, it's all broken down for you there.
And just as a reference here. Ooh.
No, I will add on this as well. In reading an article, I did a little research on underwater hotels, and was reading an article today, and they actually said that, relatively speaking, in terms of the hotels that provide some type of underwater experience, Jules is still one of the best bargains around. So even though it may seem like a costly endeavor, if you want to go over to Dubai or one of the other places that have those glass bottom hotels, if you will, apparently you're paying quite a bit more.
And I think that's a cop out for calling it an underwater hotel personally.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's like the difference between the Atlantis submarine and a glass bottom boat, really.
Yeah.
I would describe it.
Right.
Sorry, I was actually trying to pull up a hotel's referral, but I couldn't get the thing to work. Glenn again. Glenn says the budget for Jules in 2012 was $3 million per year. Now that a lot of the inefficiency is gone, what is an estimated budget to remain active?
That is something I would have no idea about. Not trying to dodge that question, but I don't deal in that side. It's really above my pay grade, and I've been focused on just making sure that we can keep it running and keep it open.
So I'm gonna jump in here real quick. So what things, obviously you're trying to get her back to its glory. Is there anything you want to add on that wasn't there before?
Well, it's not necessarily it wasn't before, but over the years, things have come and gone. Like, you see behind me, we've got the viewing port, but it's dark. So one of the things that I want to get, once I've got all the inside details dealt with, I want to get some outside lighting that maybe the guests can control, because it's really interesting to be able to the way the lighting's set up here, it doesn't penetrate out into the environment very well. So it'd be nice to have some outside. And we've had them before, but they broke. Ultimately, again, metal and electrical things out in the ocean tend to wear out a little more quickly than topside. So one of my first goals once we get everything inside up to speed is to get some outside lighting so that the people that are visiting can maybe flip a switch and turn on the external lights and bring some of the marine life in close and really enjoy that experience.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
One of the things I always like to, when we get to talking to people that are, I guess, in the same kind of pursuit or have the same goals that we do when it comes to, underwater exploration, underwater habitation. We've had good conversations with like the seasteading community, even though like they're above the waves where we're below it. What would you say to a lot of the people that when you talk to them about having an underwater habitat, there's a lot of people that will say, well, you're destroying the environment by doing that. Do you feel the same way, or do you feel that there's, done responsibly could be a good thing?
Yeah, I would say that, maybe you haven't really thought it through. Especially nowadays, so much more is known about, ocean conservation and, what things can, so let me just give you, number one, this is stationary. Most underwater habitats are stationary. So there's a lot of thought that goes into where they're being placed and having a minimal impact on the environment. But, just to give you some idea here, again, we have a toilet down here, and, we have a pump that can deal with human, refuse, if you will, or the byproduct of eating. And we pump
Poop.
That up to the,
let's just say it.
We pump that up to the surface, and it goes right into our normal sewer system. So, very conscious about, basically polluting our own environment. And, so same thing with all the trash. After every mission, we take the trash up and swim it up. We recycle what needs to be recycled and, throw away what needs to be thrown away. And just overall, I think if you look at the Jules Lagoon and the Marine Lab campus and so forth, a lot of information being shared with people about, hey, think about how much water you're using. Think about what you're doing with your trash and what you can recycle. And so that's a constant message that we're putting forth, because again, we really see this kind of, I know that Jan, we've talked about this a lot, is that, we want to kind of expand a little bit beyond just being the hotel, but really being an ambassador for ocean conservation and seeing what we can do with Jules, because it's a very unique experience. And so, myself, I'm really looking forward to bringing people down and creating content and talking about, ocean conservation, because I believe the uniqueness of this habitat puts eyes on what we're doing and allows us, gives us an opportunity to share our passion for the ocean, our passion for ocean conservation. So I think that that's a very important part of what we're trying to do moving forward, is not just have it be hey, I spent a night in an underwater hotel, but hey, I spent a night in an underwater habitat, and, maybe I got to, take a plankton seine and run it through the moon pool and put it under a microscope. So really looking to expand some citizen science. And, the response has been great. We've got meetings that we've had meetings. We've got more meetings coming up with some of the top marine conservation organizations out there. We're really looking forward, when we can talk about it, we'll talk about it, but we're really looking forward to using, Jules to communicate the importance of preserving what we have and trying to figure out what we can do to try to reverse some of these effects and so forth.
Brendan, real quick, I got super concerned just a second ago because I heard your dog barking, and I had to question whether it was coming from you or or Thane for a second. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think Thane's got a dog down there in Jules right now.
Well, we haven't had that request. Now, I know there's been some diving dogs out there, so hey, but.
One thing I was thinking about, we were talking about this, going back to the safety of staying down there, is, and I don't think people may think about this either, is that Jules was not designed to sit at 20-some feet underwater anyway. So sure. It's over designed for where it's at. So
Yeah, 50 to 100 feet was the the standard mission. So if you went to 50 to 100 feet and you saturate, so they would have to go through a decompression schedule for about 48 hours. And there was a lot of oxygen used. They had to go on pure oxygen. They had a pretty complex decompression schedule, once you're saturated at 50 or 100 feet.
Yeah, very cool. I think we're reaching the top of our hour here, so I think we're going to try to wrap things up here. Be mindful of your time as well as everybody else's that's on here. Anything else you want to throw in there, Adam?
No, this has just been pretty cool just to kind of sit back and listen. And Glenn just asked who can build another one today. Well, we're working on it, Glenn. We're trying to get there.
I mean, there's probably more talk about it now than there has been in a long time. You've got Fabian Cousteau with the Proteus and so forth. You guys are out there pumping. So like I said, I think it's going to come. I think there's really, it's going to take probably a couple of the big guys, guys with some deep pockets to really, get away from the space, infatuation and turn their eyes towards what's happening here on Earth. I mean, we've heard this over and over and over again, that we have only explored just a small portion of the oceans, and manned undersea exploration. It hasn't been something that's been real active for a long period of time. There's a few habitats that have been down. There's only one or two that are currently in operation, and there's definitely need for more. There's definitely a need for some greater attention to hey, let's save these oceans. So the 30 for 30 and 30 goal is something we're certainly going to get behind and do everything that we can to promote. Because we wouldn't be here if we didn't have a passion and love for what's going on in the oceans.
Very true.
Real quick, Richard Brown just asked, have you considered a garden on board for longevity of living time without food provisioning?
Well, we actually had I think you guys had posted some of the Nemo's garden stuff recently as well. But I think there was, I think the same guys were doing some stuff in here not too long ago. So, and I can tell you that you can do. We know for a fact that you can do hydroponics, but you can also take dirt down and grow stuff. So it certainly can be done in either medium. And there are people out there that are looking into it. And over the years, there's so. Again, it's going to take me some time, but ultimately we had the Chalupa 30, which was a program that NASA did in the late 90s, I believe, where they had astronauts down here for 30 days to kind of study the effects of isolation. They had a whole setup, which sometime I'll get to posting pictures, but we were growing stuff down here as part of that program. So yeah, absolutely, it can be done, has been done, and could be done in the future.
Very cool.
Sweet. Well, Brendan, I don't think.
Yeah, I turned the air conditioners off for you guys. I want to turn them back on. It's hot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, any parting words then from you then?
Well, here's this. I will tell you this. I have been doing this for a long time. I have seen and done a lot of things in my diving career. Every single time I pop up in the moon pool in Jules, it is cool. It is about one of the coolest things you can do. And even if that's all you do, we allow that to occur. We allow people to that are in exploring the lagoon to pop up inside and take a look what it's all about. So if you did nothing more than come to the lagoon and pay $35 to do a couple dives here and pop up into the moon pool and just see what it's all about, I would encourage you to do that. And then you might find yourself, let's see, I got to save up the money now. How can I get down there for become an aquanaut or so forth? So yeah, it's just super cool. And it's very unique. There's very few people that have done it, even over, you would be a part of a unique group of people that have ever spent a night underwater in a true underwater hotel. And we'd love to have you.
All right, guys, with that, we're gonna wrap it up. So as always, and I'll go through these quick so Thane can get his air conditioner on. So we got www.atlantaseacolony.com. That you go there, you can get all of our social medias. That's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. Also, this is the last week that we're doing the 5x5 habitat drive. So there's two ways you can do that. If you go to patreon.com/Atlanta Sea Colony, you sign up for $1 to $5 a month for a donation for helping us build the Atlanta Sea Colony project. Also, if you want to make a one-time donation, intervals of $5 gives you an entry to win a t-shirt or a water bottle. So you can go to www.paypal.me/Atlanta Sea Colony for that. Also go to atlantaseacolony.com/merch. Check out our social medias. We just released a really cool design that we got, some hammerhead shark designs, which is awesome. And Brendan's going to buy me a hat that has that on there. So thank you, Brendan. And also every time we sell something from that store, a proceed of that gets to us as well. So also thank you to our patrons, Edward Haas, Brian Acosta, and S. Babe Hyde. Also check out Primal50.com, that's Thane's site, as well as marinelab.org. Those are the two that we kind of brought
Jules.
up today. And Jules, I didn't actually write that one down. Sorry.
JUL.com. Pretty simple.
JUL.com. Thank you, Thane, for that. So that's all we got today, guys. So thank you very much once again. Thank you, Thane, for joining us. And hopefully we'll have you back on again sometime. And we'll get that AC turned back on for you.
There you go. All right, guys. Thank you.